ensure that democracy survives, even in times where autocrats seem to be taking hold, and that we remind ourselves that these freedoms that we have and for which our military fights are so precious. So let's get on with the show, and thank you so much. We'll look forward to your questions, which are generally way better than mine. Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we're discussing supporting our veterans during National Military Appreciation Month with special guests. Michael Blecker, Executive Director at Swords to Plowshares in San Francisco, and Paul Cox, who is a board member at Swords to Plowshares. And a reminder to Zoom attendees that we'll take 3 snap polls during the show and we'll announce results. And your questions submitted through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen will be included in our discussion. So thank you so much for joining us, Michael, Paul, and I'm going to set you up. I'm going to go over to you, Michael. It's National Military Service Appreciation Month. We should appreciate our military men and women every single day, and those people identify differently every single day of our lives. It's so very important that we not only have ideals, but we also have the strength to stand behind them. And it's important to for us all to realize, particularly those who have not served in the military, that an effective military must function in ways that are completely unique. And so exiting from service comes with some real challenges. One becomes acculturated into a particular modus of operating, and then making that transition can really be difficult. And in addition to that, there are healthcare issues, housing, family understandings, and so on and so forth that need to be dealt with. So, Michael, let's start with you just sort of giving us the lay of the land of the services that you provide and also the experiences that our veterans have as they exit military service and the kind of support that they receive both from the VA, but also from organizations like yours.
Yeah, thanks. We're a, nonprofit California corporation, 501c3, right? And so we're like in the heart of it. Our mission is to help vets. We understand that war causes wounds that last beyond the battlefield. And so we're there to address all those wounds that we see, and we're in the community. We see how they're expressed in the community. So over the years, we've developed certain programs trying to get vets jobs in the labor market, trying to get back into school on those issues, trying just like connect them with their fellow veterans in their community. The idea of community is very significant for folks getting back, getting adjusted. And over the years, a lot of veterans have had some issues with housing. So, we've been around since, the mid 70s. So we've seen this transition. Much of this came from the transition from the Vietnam War, veterans coming back and needing help. And so over the years, all that counseling, helping vets with jobs, helping vets with, getting back into school. And then starting in the mid 80s, when so many vets were homeless, a significant number of vets homeless. In fact, the number was nearly 300,000 veterans were a part of the homeless population. They were.
But we've seen this cycle repeat, right? In the aftermath of the First World War, we had the great encampments and the March on Washington, and then the riots that occurred when they were pushed back. And in the Second World War, we also had a very uncovered issue, right? It was kind of hidden because it was the Great War and the victory and so on and so forth.
The stress.
And then the Korean War, also in the aftermath of the Korean War. So this is not a new problem. Right. We're just coming up with better solutions, aren't we?
Right. But the solutions really weren't there when we started, right? We had to sort of like make the solutions, right? We had to sort of like try to get the institutions to do a better job, the VA, our healthcare system, that kind of thing. And we're in the thick of it. We've grown, now we have 200 employees. We have a budget of almost 30 mil. We have like 2 office sites in San Francisco and Oakland. We have like 7 housing sites. We have over 430 permanent supportive housing sites because we've really had to do housing. The city, the public sector has asked us to step in to help. We like connect the VA system with the non-VA system because the VA is it's a really rich healthcare system. It's a national healthcare system. It's available everywhere in this country, throughout the nation. They have a big responsibility. So we try to help in our community to get those systems working better too.
And Paul, before we got on to the broadcast, you did a really interesting thing. You basically parsed the problem. You talked about which veterans are more likely to be affected by a transition challenge and more likely to experience need after exiting the services. Could you just lay out that analysis for us a bit here so that we know who we're talking about?
Well, sure. I mean, I think military service can be really stressful for anybody, and is for everybody to some degree. But it's very common that people who serve in the military have some difficulties after they've left the military. And I think that's true for Michael and me both, but we seem to be functional at this point. But some people just never sort of get over that period, especially combat veterans, but also people who've experienced abuse in the military sexual trauma, and then injuries and PTSD and TBI. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. Training accidents can be very devastating.
What is TBI?
I'm sorry, a traumatic brain injury, which seems to be the signature injury of this war that was not recognized in previous wars. Shell shock was sometimes, probably very often, was caused by brain injuries, but it wasn't recognized as such. It was just recognized as somebody who's just seen too much war. But it may have very well been a physical injury. So TBI is the physical injury of the most current forever war that we see.
And we're having greater protective gear, right? And so while the body might remain whole, the interior, the organs, including the brain, could be injured in a way that is invisible and actually manifests over time, sometimes with a great delay. So it's much more difficult to see somebody, not see an injury, and understand that they are indeed injured, right?
Yeah, and actually, in recent wars, they're really loading these soldiers down with a lot of gear, even protective gear. So a lot of soldiers wind up with muscular skeletal issues. That even though I carried a lot of weight in Vietnam, it didn't seem to affect me. But boy, when somebody's running around in 110-degree heat with long clothes on and lots of armor, and plus the ammo and their food and whatever else they need to be carrying, it can really be strenuous, even on a young man or a young woman.
And so we're also talking a little bit about how people enter the services. You had made the point that the officer corps has an easier time making the transition because we are in a knowledge economy. And so if you take a look at the officer corps, which is focused on the knowledge part of planning and command and logistics and so on and so forth, those knowledge skills are more easily applied than a skill that happens to be more tied to a physical activity or a combat activity, because we're not engaged in combat in civilian life, right? Or at least we shouldn't be. So you have this real disconnect. So Michael, what kind of services, if you were going to lay out the services, and by the way, this is not a special San Francisco thing, right? If you go into New York, you'll find counterparts. If you go into Chicago, you'll find counterparts. If you go to Toledo, Ohio, or you go to small town America, you will find veteran support organizations that are dealing with these same issues within their environment. So talk a little bit about what kind of services and how you segment those services.
Yeah, we have this term, this wraparound term where, you help, you're set up in the community, right? So you're there where veterans are, right? So we have these drop-in programs, and we also do outreach. So where the vets are, we're there to try to, help them back into the system, and so part of that is making sure you have like, you receive them, you're available, and, you treat them with the respect and dignity that they deserve. So you have some cultural, your vets serving vets, or you have this close connection to veterans, so you understand their needs. And you try to provide what they need, what wraparound care they might, if they're on the street, then, you got your work cut out for you, right? If they're in crisis, typically they're in crisis, when you're low income and, you have a lot of stress, right? Just the stress of being impoverished and trying to get back on your feet is a big deal. And so we're sort of, we just sort of help start in that process. We have housing, we have mental health counselors. We try to get them enrolled into the VA healthcare system. We have attorneys, because people don't realize that there are great veteran benefits, but some of them require, advocacy or claims assistance. You can file a claim with the VA, right? Because you could have stress that's connected to the time you were in the military. And that's called disability compensation, and you can actually get income for that. But it doesn't come to you automatically. You have to establish your claim. And sometimes you need the help of an attorney to do that. And attorneys aren't that plentiful in this area. So we've been doing this work, for years and years, and have developed some expertise. We have attorneys there to help vets. A lot of veterans ended up getting kicked out of the service unfairly and received bad conduct discharges, or what we call bad paper. During the Vietnam War, there were over 500,000 veterans who had other than honorable discharges. That's a big number. And that's like a lifetime stigma. And that could be for a number of things. It could be very unfair what happened, right? It could be a result of your own dealing with stress of what happened, and now your difficulty readjusting back to the time and finishing out the time you're in the service, right? There's a number of things that when you get into it, you realize these are needs, and you have to have sort of some ability to address these quote wounds. And so that's how it starts. How do you deal with that? You better have the resources to handle, and that's what you're going to see if you're really, in real time dealing with this issue.
And Michael, don't forget to mention employment training.
Right.
So we find employment for veterans. We help prepare them for interviews and for employment, and that's a key thing for a lot of veterans. Is they don't know how to do a resume. They don't know how to conduct themselves in an interview, and we've helped many thousands of veterans get jobs, good and often really, really good jobs.
We just completed a poll. We said, what is the most urgent challenge faced by veterans? And people came down to three. Interestingly enough, housing was not mentioned. The three that were mentioned were mental and physical health challenges. Civilian and VA care services are not up to the challenge, and there needs to be some gaps that are filled by organizations like yourself. And then the challenge in transition to the non-military work culture. Those three areas. Do you feel that housing is one of the major challenges, Michael and Paul? Or do you feel like
it's certainly a challenge for a veteran that doesn't have it?
Right.
That's a life-crushing problem. I mean, it's for whether a veteran or anybody else to not be able to know where you're going to sleep tonight, or just to be able to hang on to that little corner of a storefront entry that you sleep in for weeks at a time. Is so debilitating, and it's really key for a small segment of the veterans population, but not insignificant. I think actually I would pick some different things for the major challenges. I think that one of the challenges is aging Vietnam veterans and younger veterans. I mean, some people that are Persian Gulf veterans are in their 60s, and the health problems that come with that, and the VA's the need for the VA to make adjustments, and they are talking about opening up new nursing facilities for really elderly veterans. The second one is younger veterans are often walking around with hidden injuries, as I mentioned before: TBI, PTSD, moral injury, MST, military sexual trauma, and the like. And the third thing I think is an effort. It's a political problem, which is the really push to privatize the VA, which is an amazing system. It's got its problems, and everybody's got complaints about how their services at the VA were. But the solution to that is not to push veterans who need specialized care into the strip mall medical centers that don't know anything about them, don't keep a history of them, don't understand what the special needs that veterans have, and are sometimes.
Paul, there's gold in them there hills, right? So you know what privatization is about.
Absolutely, it's about, let's get some of that money that the VA normally gets, and it's going to really strip the meat off the VA and leave a skeleton that's really just a payer if it goes to the full effort that some people are trying to put into it.
Yeah, I don't understand the logic behind taking a private health system, an insurance system that, by all accounts, from all across the political spectrum, doesn't work particularly well in the United States in comparison to our colleagues in the G7, developed countries, and then expand that dysfunctional system into an area where the VA, as you say, for all of its faults, is doing a heroic job. Those people who are serving the VA, who often themselves are veterans, are really managing a huge system. And then you're providing some complementary areas. Could you talk a little bit about why a nonprofit can sometimes be much more nimble, much more responsive than the VA, right? Because in a sense, you're working against time, right? If somebody's homeless, Paul, that night is the most important night of their life, right? And then the next night will be the most important night of their lives. And so you're working against time. So sometimes, Michael, as you say, you can't necessarily go through the attorneys and the applications and so on. Talk a little bit about how you gap fill where time is of essence and you need to be more nimble.
Yeah, it's almost like you're triaging, right? Like a medic, you're seeing the most wounded and you're tending to that need first before you get to the next and the next. So when you're in a community, that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with people on the street who are in crisis, and you're trying to get them off the street, to get them sheltered. And then once because you can't really do anything if they're unhoused, right? They're going to continue to suffer.
Crisis. Crisis is when you don't know where to turn. That's crisis, right? It could have any source, but you just don't know where to turn. That's what a crisis is.
And the stress it generates, right? You get under tremendous stress, mental health stress, and which, has a debilitating effect on your overall health. You carry that stress around, and we see veterans who have health issues that are typically in someone 20 years older than themselves, right? Almost every veteran that's in our housing program has multiple healthcare issues. They're in physical pain, but they also have issues with, advanced respiratory problems. They have, it's diabetes, up and down, and as well as depression. And so there's multiple issues, right, that they're dealing with. So I think a nonprofit is nimble, can do that. And the thing about what we can do is sometimes is we're out there, and we can, we can identify the gaps and say, the institution has to do a better job in this area, and pull those two, the non-VA and the VA, because the problems are immense and the resources are strained. So
one is a system, right? You have to treat people as cohorts, as a member of a cohort, right? You have to go through a workflow and so on and so forth. And you get to actually look at somebody as an individual, right?
That's true. I mean, that's the nonprofit. Yeah, that's what you do, one person at a time, right?
And I should say that the VA is very helpful in this matter. They don't provide housing. I mean, they have what they call CLCs, community living centers, that are really convalescent homes for people who are injured and can't be on the street, but don't need to be in the hospital, but can't actually go home. because of their injuries, but they don't provide housing. They do provide funding for outfits like Swords for housing and for rent support and for kind of what we would call Section 8 housing, HUD-VASH, and other programs that the VA funds, and Source to Plowshares and other nonprofits like us administer that money and provide those services to the veterans so that they can stay off the streets.
Well, we had done an interview with Susan Angle, director of the Homeless Veterans Initiative, and Mark Johnson, who was at the time, I think it was during the Bush administration, acting assistant secretary for the Office of Community Planning and Development. And you see some of the partnership amongst different federal agencies with the VA to provide housing support and funding throughout. But you can definitely act so much faster, right? Somebody walks in off the street, you can actually start to support them right away.
Mm-hmm.
No forms need to be filled out. I mean, eventually you probably have to fill out forms. Michael, how do you deal with the funding side? I mean, you're talking about a $30 million budget, you're talking about 200 employees, those folks have to be paid. Talk about the sources of your income.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we run a very lean organization. We have like a 12.5% our administrative fee, infrastructure, if you will, overhead.
That's
and oftentimes the contracts will not pay you that. So you have to constantly fundraise to sort of fill that gap. But, you know, you have to you have to have a finance department, you have to have contracts, you have to administer everything, you have to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, you know, take care of your staff, right? I mean, it's a terrible situation where you have folks who are like facing clients and in the field and having to staff houses and difficult housing settings 24/7, right? Making sure those folks have the salaries, the benefits they need, right? You know, to make sure they have you protect people, have a good plan. So those are all, and then you have to figure out making sure your money comes in and goes out, and you have to have the right people in place. But I think we operate a very lean kind of agency, and we really focus on things like, issues like diversity and equity in the workplace, right? Who gets promoted? Why do they get promoted? How does staff feel about their jobs? Taking care of our staff is very, very crucial.
Well, you also have to have a staff that looks like the people who are being served, right?
Yeah.
So, if you don't, then you end up with sort of embedded alienation. How many people in your staff are veterans themselves?
That's an excellent question. We have over a third are vets themselves, right? It used to be much higher, but that's the nature of this work. And so, it's about a third are veterans.
Well, and some additional fraction are spouses of vets.
Right.
Yeah, they all have deep cultural connections.
Yeah, and there's tremendous commitment to what Swords does because sometimes the work is not all that pleasant, and it certainly doesn't pay all that well.
Yeah,
and people really step up.
Yeah, we have this program called Combat to Community, where it's all about training and making folks culturally aware, like first responders and others who encounter veterans, letting them know what the issues might be, right? So they can do a better job and de-escalate issues that occur, right, in their engagements with other veterans. So the cultural aspect is very important to us.
Paul, do you find that there are certain skills that that come from military training that are very applicable within civilian life, that you find that there may be some patterns where you can actually take advantage in a positive sense of all that training, of all that acculturation to help people find applicability for those skills within a civilian setting?
Speaking personally, no. I mean, the Marine Corps taught me how to shoot and take orders and march. But using the GI Bill, I've managed to get a really good education since then. But yeah, sure, there are plenty of jobs in the military that are that have that provide skills and the maturity for young people to mature into that they can use to later on. Some of the problem getting jobs for some veterans is they don't know how to express those skills in a resume or an interview in ways that get them that translate from the military MOS to a job skill. Even though they exist, they may not work like that. But I'm not an expert at these issues, and it was not my personal experience.
Well, and Michael, are you, in terms of the workforce development and the jobs side, you talked a little bit about resume building and about the communication piece. Are you also connecting to employers directly?
Yeah, we have like an employer advisory committee that we try to work with. We try to like build support among, the workforce. We have contracts with the Department of Labor to actually place veterans in jobs. And you work about, the pluses that come along with being, having served in the military, the teamwork and the team building and the ability to respond and address issues. And you try to work with that on that framework,
I'm going to ask a closing question. I'm going to leave it to first Paul and then Michael to answer it. We asked a question: what would be the best way to ensure veterans have housing, health care, food, and employment opportunities upon retiring to the military? And we asked a number of different options: tax incentives through nonprofit, community and church organizations, government programs, and it's every individual's and every business's responsibility to help our veterans. So everybody in America is responsible. This is the interesting thing. Most people answered that it's every individual's responsibility to help. In other words, we should all walk down the street and think about this issue. We should all get up in the morning and think about this issue. We should all, in our businesses, be thinking about this issue. Could you first, Paul, could you talk a little bit about how we should be thinking and what we should be doing about this question of taking people who have served our company, taken a chunk of their lives and dedicated it to that type of service, and then need to make a transition into a non-military setting? What should we all be doing to help more?
Well, I certainly think that people have a responsibility to our society. And that's one of the reasons many of us went into the military is, in order to be part of something bigger than us and to serve our country and to express our love for our country. And I think those are important qualities. However, I also don't think it's all not just individual responsibility. I think the government has a responsibility for this. If we're going to send young men and women off to war, we damn well need to take care of them when they come back. And if we can't afford to do that, then we can't afford to have a war.
It's an articulation of the social compact. If we're going to have people who serve and those who don't, then at least the people who don't serve in that capacity can serve those who serve.
Sure.
We should all be involved, right? It's all about protecting a set of values and a democracy, and we should all be viewed as being involved in that, right?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Michael, what can we do? What practical action can we take aside from writing a check to Plowshares? But
that's my pitch.
Well, I think the idea that veterans are some sort of outside us, we need to frame it as if they were veterans, if that was, and it could very well be your brother, your sister, your father. What would you want for someone who went through a service? What would you want them to have when they return, right? Think of it in a very personal way, that those veterans out there could be your brother or could be your father or could be your son or your daughter. What would you want for them, right? You want to make sure that their health is good, their stress is relieved, they have opportunity, right? They have availability of, they can get housing if they need it. They can go to school. A lot of, I joined the military to go to school, right? The GI Bill, that there's those things. So this, us and them, think of them as part of the family, right? What would you want for your family, right? What kind of service? And I think that whole idea about the cost of war is enormous, right? And people never think about the returning, those who return from that war, right? And the cost that we owe, right? We owe those folks, us, we got to take care of ourselves.
It seems that patriotism is is easier to express than to enact in our daily lives, and so this is part of our of the question of this time, is that how do we act in our daily lives to strengthen the country and to support those who have served the country. Michael Blecker, Executive Director at Swords to Plowshares in San Francisco, and Paul Cox, thank you so much for being a board member of Sword to Plowshares, and thank you so much for your support of our veterans and our communities. Please thank your boards, please thank your funders, please thank your wonderful staff who are helping people that need help, our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, our mothers. Thank you so much. Everybody stay safe, and we're going to be talking about on Thursday, learning opportunities and the benefits of children's museums. So hopefully those of you who can attend will be part of that discussion as well.